All right. Good afternoon, everyone. If you noticed, I'm the second speaker who's using the podium today. We just try to break the pattern. But the topic I'm going to talk about is budgeting, which is a really fun topic. I'd like to ask you a question. How many of you actually in a position to actually responsible for budget? All right, there's some. Okay, it's not bad. So then those who didn't raise hand, you don't care about budget? Is that what it is? The budgeting is tough, right? And when I asked to talk about this, my entire presentation was about 5 slides. That's all there is to get the budget that you need. And I had to extend it to fit into 25 minutes. So this is where you're going to come in to help me to fill the gap. I have to show that as a company policy. So now I'm going to start with this. Anybody recognize this buddy? Or I shouldn't say buddy, but this person. What is that? Okay. Close enough? Can you speak up? Right. He's the Aristotle, right? One of the greatest Greek philosopher, right? Now, what does he have to do with the guy that, by the way, 2,000 years ago, right? What does it have to do anything with the budgeting? Anybody can take a wild guess? By the way, those who are in the front row, you are my go-to. You better answer the questions. So, anybody? This is very important because if you don't get it, you lose the rest of the presentation. Okay, that's good enough. The reason that he's relevant is because he is almost like a founder of this whole thought of persuasion, right? His philosophy is around persuading you to do something that he wants people to do. And at the end of the day, the budgeting, whether you want to get budget or you're going to give to someone as a budget, it's all about persuasion, right? So far, so good? I need to make sure that you believe what I'm about to tell you. And there's a sort of rhetorical principles that he has shared over the 2,000 years ago. And those are around 3 principles, which is what I'm going to build the rest of the presentation around. So the first one is around ethos, or translation in this context of budgeting, credibility. The second thing is about logos, or logic, again, in the context of budgeting. And the last one that he talked about was pathos, which is emotions. Now, these 3 things are very important, that it's not just about budgeting, but everything that we do as designers, I assume, in this room, where if you're not a designer, you should be in this other room. But this is very important, and I'm going to tell a lot of stories and case studies about how this ethos and logos and pathos are so foundational, the things that you have to keep in mind in getting into the budgeting conversation, and the type of budget that you need to get to the things that you need to do. So let me dig into the first one about credibility, right? Within the credibility, there's 2 things I'm going to talk to you about that to many of you is straightforward, but it's very important to know how this is relevant and how you can interpret that into your actions. So first of all, it's about reputation. How many of you think, honestly, that you really have a reputation? Thank you for your bravery. There's a few. The reason that you didn't raise your hand is because of what? What's that? You don't think it's a battle? Okay, that's one way. But be honest, come on, this is all interactive. I need to consume the 25 minutes I have. But your honesty is a really important dialogue. Ego. Okay, that you think that you're better than others, but you didn't have to raise your hand? No. The other way around? But what's good about this reputation is this. It's very, very one of those topics that you have a little control over. Meaning that you may think you have a reputation or you may not have a reputation. Doesn't matter. But what the matter is that people next to you is going to perceive you one way or the other, whether you like it or not. And they will form their opinion about you. And that becomes reputation. And that's really sad reality. However, in the context of budgeting, is incredibly important for you to build a reputation. So, what you need to do now is forget about your past. Past as in 5 seconds ago. Those who didn't raise your hand, now it's time for you to act at the present time, that you do something different about it. So when I ask you a question in about a few minutes in this presentation, you want to participate, and you want to raise your hand, and you want to answer questions. That's how you rebuild your reputation. Pretty straightforward. It's just that your ego or the mindset is in the way to get what you need to get to. All right? So far, so good? Now, I'm going to tell the story to build on my assertion. Another question. Anybody recognize these two logos? Okay, so top one is the frog. The bottom one is AKQA. What do they have in common with my talk here? Other than they're one of the top 10 global design and innovation agencies around the world. Anybody guess? Well, it has to do with these two people. On the top is Patricia, who's a former founder and the CEO of Frog. The bottom is a guy named Jeff nor Scott, who manages a lot of studios for AKQA, usually in Europe and Asia. The reason that I use them as an example for reputation is this. When I moved from San Francisco to London to build up a new design function for Visa, from my global role that I kind of put aside, I met a lot of people because I really didn't know Europe. I've been here many times, but never lived here before. So I had to connect with a lot of people who can give me some sort of a guidance. And Patricia, one who I met in San Francisco, and she goes, Kevin, when you go to London, you must, she used the word must, meet this guy, Jeff. And I said, who is this guy? And she goes, well, he runs a few offices for AKQA. And as soon as I heard AKQA, anybody who works for AKQA here? No, good. I had this allergic reaction because I just did not want to work with AKQA. Now, however, I'm working with them right now. So that's the flip side of the story. The reason because is she came with a highly credible reputation in the world of design. Anybody who in the design world should recognize her name or the agency that she came from or she found with her husband. And so I met the guy. Long story short, he really had this another reputation I did not know about. It's a regional reputation, not a global, but that's something that I was really sold on it. So the point I'm trying to make here is this. You have to do the homework, but sometimes it's a reciprocal. You may be the receiving end of budget, or you may be the one that giving the budget, but you have to do the homework of understanding who that person is. The reason that Jeff impressed me a lot is he actually studied my LinkedIn profile from top to bottom, and he really asked a lot of questions that really, honestly, a stranger wouldn't care. From like my school to my first job to some of the LinkedIn articles I wrote. I mean, he literally spent time to really get to know me. And that is something that investment that you need to do to regain or rebuild your reputation. Because it's a two-way street, right? The second sort of lessons learned about reputation is that you have to request an introduction. Now, those people in the position have this, what they call the social circle, right? Professionally, socially, they have a circle. Now, you need to get into their circle somehow. That's the number one task for you to either gain or regain your reputation. And that starts with a really authentic, that kind of conversation that you need to have. So that, and then through that, you get connections that more than you could ever get in LinkedIn, for example, that I'm sure a lot of you are spending time today and tomorrow connecting with one another. That's okay, but try to build that introduction through another person that you know reputable, right? And lastly, it's about the making a long first impression. Those of you who have dated someone, you know what I'm talking about. Making that impression first time is going to guarantee you for at least another date, if not marriage, if not forever and ever happy after, right? So that's pretty straightforward. But let's get into some complicated topic. The other things that matters for the ethos, right? Or credibility. It's about demonstrating your credibility. Now, let me ask another question. I just talked about reputation. Anybody see a correlation between reputation and credibility? This is a tough one that I need to make sure that. Yes, you raise your hand, so you better speak.
I do see a correlation there.
And then, okay, I give you a pass. So the reputation is all about relationship or relational, right? And it is about how you actually build your credibility. Credibility, on the other hand, is actually what you do, basically achievement and things that you are about to capable of, right? Now, the reason that it's important to discern, but only also focusing on that, is this. What does all this brand has in common? Speak up. They're companies. Yes, they're companies. Now, these are the companies that I have worked for in the past 20 years. Okay? The reason that I mentioned this isn't so much about me trying to show that I came from all these different backgrounds. It's about how I failed every single those companies that I worked for at least once. And then how I, however, rebuilt that credibility. And the way you do this is pretty simple. You have to be honest about failures you did. And oftentimes we are type of professions that are trained to talk about accomplishment. Right? In your head, when you talk about the gentleman in the front talked about the ego, we have so much ego that last thing you want to talk about is about the failures that you have. But on the other hand, the failure is the one you make a very strong candidate for something next job is looking for. And so that's one thing that I really learned from all these companies is there are traps that you're going to fall into. And what the leadership is looking for, who's about to trust you for budget, is that demonstrating that humility, that you are the human being, you have shortcomings of it, but you can now demonstrate how you can do better with that failures you have. And so there's three sort of lessons that you need to take away from this one, other than all these companies that you may want to hope in the future work for, is you got to build a very strong portfolio. And this is something that I talk to a lot of people about, how sometimes you're going into other industry, right? I don't know where you come from, all different backgrounds, but when you think about staying in the one industry, for example, those of you who work in the commerce, you probably don't want to leave the commerce world, whether it's because, well, the hottest industry or where you're just comfortable. But I encourage you to actually take a leap of faith and go to random industry, whether it's healthcare, whether it's IoT, whether it's service sector, because that's how you build a portfolio, not within the verticals that you're going to be there for 20 years old. And there's nothing wrong with it, by the way. I'm not making any points across other than if you want to build a portfolio to build a reputation and credibility, sometimes the easiest way is just go into a very different industry and gain 2, 3, 5 years and then come back. Because when you come back, you become very incredibly competent, someone that the company is going to want to, and therefore trusting you for all the administrative stuff, including budgeting that you need to really do, manage for the organizations. And the second thing is really about developing your personal brand. As I said before, this is really about how your style of communicating or how you're interacting with each other is really about how it's become a foundational to build your credibility and reputation. And so, for example, a lot of people, myself included, make a bunch of mistakes. I think some of the presentation earlier, maybe it was you, right, that talked about from don't hide behind the email. If I relay that message, email is one form of either fast track or derailer for you to build a credibility. We often misuse email as a sort of revenge or as a way of defending yourself. But that also leaves a trace. So if you want to really build a credibility, keep the email very short. To his point, pick up the phone, have a face-to-face conversation, and don't leave a trace. Because once you leave a trace, it's really hard to regain that type of credibility. Okay? So that's the one thing that, something that you can probably do it right away. Stop emailing each other and then start picking up the phone. The last one is about removing any feeling of doubt. As I said before, this is all about failure. You all have experienced failure. You might have failed yesterday before you came to this conference, and you feel down. You want to talk to some speakers and presenters about some tips and guidance. But the fact of the matter is, because you failed, or you didn't quite as succeed as you wanted to be, you're now a much more stronger person than yesterday. And so embrace the failure. Be honest. Talk about why you made a mistake, because no one's going to penalize you for being honest. And that's the one thing that is very important to build the credibility. Okay? Now, the next thing is about a logic, right? And it's about being very specific. What do you want? And this is something that a lot of people are asking for. And I'll give you a really quick story. This is a person, I'm not going to quiz you because you probably don't know this person. It's Carrie, one of my top designers that I have worked with in over 3 different companies so far. And she came to me one day. Those of you who work in the commerce world, like marketplace, few, like eBay's and Amazon world, she came to me saying one day, Kevin, I need $500,000 and give me 2 months and I will show you what this new marketplace needs to look like, that we can actually build it. Quite daunting. The principal designer come to you with that type of money and the duration is something that you kind of think crazy. But I believed it, and she, long story short, succeeded immensely to the point where the current marketplace that you see in the eBay.com is somewhat indirect result of her work. The point I'm trying to make here is very simple. When someone makes you a request as a either budget requester or budget receiver, and then when they're being very precise and very concise, trust them, because they know what they're doing. If someone comes to you with elaborated slides of PowerPoints and that try to convince you, don't trust, because they don't know what they're doing. And that's exactly how industry works, because most of the stuff that you are working on today, you are not the first one. And that is one of the things that we have to take away. You're not the first one who's working on it, so why are you elaborating a lot of things that you can easily be concise about by pulling things from the places that the people have done it for you? Number 2 is about, again, convey clear demand. Again, she came to me with an unforgettable number that I really felt still like that was like almost half of my budget that I have to give to one person for that 2 months. So what I'm going to do with the rest of 10 months. But again, when the specific demand is clear, that means that that person understands how, and therefore someone who's about to decide whether to give out the budget or not is tend to pull towards that a magnet that this person brings to the table. So it's not about the passion, it's about being clear about the demand that you're asking for. By the way, this is about also understanding how you can chunk it. So when she could have asked for 1 million, she chunked it down to $500,000 because she knew that what she can deliver with other product and other researchers in the company. So it's about understanding and being pragmatic about it. Last thing is about highlight the what's at stake. Again, the reason that I was convinced is because we at the time at eBay, marketplace was a really stinking experience. Those of you who remember back in early 1990s. So it was pretty daunting that we had to do something about it. No one was doing anything about it. Product team was a little bit conservative, talking about incremental A/B testings. So we as a design need to take a leap of faith, and that was pretty obvious betting that we had to do, which fortunately it kind of panned out. Another examples of logic or principles is this is very important. What's in for me? And this is the number one question that everyone is asking. If you come to anybody with, hey, I need anywhere from 50 grand to 500 grand, that's what they're asking. Number one in their head is, well, what's in for me? I hear you, but what's in for me? And it's not so much just selfish, the response, but this is one of the example of demonstrating the APIs. Those who are familiar with the APIs, we as a Visa is full of platform with a bunch of APIs anyone can build on top of it to create a commerce and the payment experience. And IDN is one of the big customers that we are working closely with. But see, no one understands the API. They really understand consumer experience, but they don't know how to translate it. So what we did was we actually basically built a prototype that out of all the APIs that we can consume as a Visa, and we built it into a very beautiful experience that actually helps clients, but also internal team to understand what is it that we actually try to communicate to the world. And that is a very important part of the lessons learned, and which is really about, number one, visualize where possible. If you're designers, you need to use the mock-ups or prototype as your primary language. Do not fall onto the same language that product team is using or developers are using. You are that artistic value that you need to use for maximum benefit. Second one, honesty. When we did this one, we didn't claim that we know all the APIs, so we actually invited all the product folks to actually help us understand what those APIs are doing in terms of consumer experience, and then we translate it quickly as possible. Okay? And lastly, make the decision easy. By building this prototype, that's the fastest way to actually make someone to make a decision, whether go or no go. Doesn't matter the consequences of it. Your job is to help someone to make decisions faster, and that's how this the principles kind of come in. Another one about, I'm moving into the last one, which is the emotions or the pathos. Familiarity is another key one, and this is something that I think most of you know how to do this one, but I'm going to reiterate the importance of it. This is our president, Ryan McNary. He's standing in front of 3,000 our clients, sort of like a Google I/O type for Visa, and he's showing a prototype vision that we as a design team have built. The reason that he chose to show it, this wasn't on the product roadmap, but he showed to all the clients of the world. The reason he did is because he saw how compelling it is that it helps build a familiarity of language, familiarity of strategies out. So he actually chose to use it in front of all the 3,000 clients that he was hosting. And that's another power of how building that familiar language, not just from a design perspective, but from a business perspective. And this is oftentimes we are shying away from, I don't need to know the business jargons, I don't need to understand the business strategy. In fact, you have to actually embrace that first before you actually start talking about the value of design and design thinkings and all the things that comes with that, your professions. So the quick lessons learned on here is very simple things. Use a common language, but it's not a design language I'm talking about, it's a business language I'm talking about. So we need to use the business language consistently with a stakeholder to make sure that they open up their wallet. Number two, use prototypes. How many of you are actually using prototype as your only way of communicating? Very few hands. I challenge you to use prototype. Before you communicate with the PowerPoints or keynotes with a bunch of words, if you're designers, you have to use the language that you know how to use the best, because that language is the one that connects emotion to emotion and heart to heart. So don't rest on the other language that you're not quite familiar with. And lastly, build the stories around real people. We often talk about human-centered design, user-centered design. That's important, but your stakeholder is also very important. If not, they're the most important human being that you ever need to care about before you go to the consumers. Because if they don't listen to you, there's nothing matters to you anyway from that company perspective. So what we did was we actually always include our president, Ryan, as a persona, and then we actually built things around him that we understand that how he sticks with the story, and then we also iterate along with that. Not necessarily about building a final product, but try to get to that budget stage that we really need the most. Make yes the only answer, and this is one way to do it is to actually build a design system. And I'm going to show you just quick 2-minute videos. I know I'm running out of time. Okay, so I know I'm over time, so I'm going to wrap it up with this one message here. Be sure that the what you saw is internally done, full house, and that's demonstrating both combination of prototype, APIs, and a design system. I know we talk a lot about design system, but if you don't have a design system in place, I really, really urgently ask you to start investing your money and effort to build that first. Because without it, none of those budgeting conversations can ever happen, because at the end of the day, what people are asking is, how am I going to scale that? Okay, I hear you from designers, you're asking for one headcount to help build this out, but how am I going to scale to all my 200 products? That's what budget holders are asking for. And the only way to justify is, unfortunately at this point, is a design system. So with that, before I get kicked out of the stage, just want to leave these 3 thoughts. And again, I kind of rushed through it. I guess I lied that it didn't take me 15 minutes, but rather entire 30 minutes. But this is really important, and I might not have delivered as quite effective as I wanted to, but I want to challenge you to leave this room with these 3 philosophies or principles that I want you to apply to it, because these are things that, not just for budgeting, but your own professions and the contribution that you can make from a design perspective. So with that, thank you so much, and